Well, thank you for having us into your home and tuning into White Horse Christian Center. All of our video and our audio department are working really hard to get all of the sermons out to you. Everything Pastor Jeff is doing on a daily bread basis, it's really wonderful. We just want you to know as pastors, we're praying for you. We're believing God for your continued healing and continued protection over all of the virus or any kind of germs or disease, any kind of pestilence. We're praying Psalm 91 over you every single day. Our extended church family and all that we're doing, we just want you to know that we love you. Today, in one of our pastors' meetings, we were talking about just the things that's going on in our nation, the virus, the stay-at-home order, how it's affecting us as believers. It's interesting. Pastor made one phrase that really stuck out in my mind. I wanted to share that with you just for a moment. And he was talking about how some people had left the church are now turning back to God. They're moving closer to God. They're being drawn to God. Maybe they were offended about some things in the gospel, maybe some things about the word. This thing just kind of went off with inside of me. And he said this phrase. He said, a diluted gospel or a watered down gospel won't protect you in a pandemic. I got to thinking about that a lot. I want to share an illustration with you that I believe the Lord laid upon my heart. Let's say that this cup is the cure or the antidote for coronavirus. But this is only enough for one person. So just this small amount right here, if one person took it, they couldn't possibly catch the coronavirus and they couldn't possibly die. The problem is this is not enough to cover our whole church or even our families or the people that we would want to give this antidote to. So we would decide, this is what we've decided. We have all of this water, so we're going to put this antidote into this water so we can have more of the cure, more of the antidote. The problem is that all we've really done is just water down the antidote. And this is what happens a lot with the gospel. Paul addressed this topic in Timothy, but also I found a quote on the internet which is really cool. A.W. Tozer said this, Christianity has been watered down until the solution is so weak that if it were poison, it would not hurt anyone. And if it were medicine, it would not cure anyone. It's kind of a sad state. When Pastor said that a watered down gospel won't work, I began to think about that. I thought about people who, and I know sometimes I preach a hard gospel and I preach a holiness gospel that have walked away from the relationship with Christ because they didn't like the fact that maybe you couldn't drink, or maybe you couldn't watch a little pornography, or maybe you couldn't sleep around a little bit, or maybe you couldn't have some forms of sex or some forms of perversion or some forms of drugs without being convicted. So they went elsewhere where maybe the gospel wasn't quite as pure as this was, maybe a little more watered down. Paul said this in 2 Timothy 3, and I'll read this in verse 1 through 5, and this is the Message Bible. Don't be naive. This is what he tells his son Timothy. Basically, he says in the King James Version, he says this, the end times are approaching, perilous times are coming. There are difficult times ahead, he says. As the end approaches, people are going to be self-absorbed, money-hungry, self-promoting, stuck up, profane, contemptuous of parents, crude, coarse, dog-eat-dog, unbending, slanderous, impulsively wild, savage, cynical, treacherous, ruthless, bloated windbags, addicted to lust. They'll make a show of religion, but behind the scenes they're animals. Paul goes on to tell Timothy, stay away from these type of people. You know that we're seeing that today in our lives. He goes on in chapter 4, verse 1, and he says this, I can't impress this on you too strongly. God is looking over your shoulder. Friend, I want you to know today, God is looking over your shoulder. Christ himself is the judge. With the final say on everyone, living and dead, he is about to break into the open with his rule. So proclaim the message. The King James Version says, preach the word with intensity. Keep on your watch. Challenge, warn, and urge your people. Don't ever quit. Just keep it simple. You're going to find that there will be times when people will have no stomach for solid teaching, but will fill up on spiritual junk food, catchy opinions that tickle their fancy. They'll turn their backs on the truth and chase mirages. But you keep your eye on what you're doing, accept the hard times along with the good times. Keep the message alive. Do a thorough job as God's servant. This is exactly what what Paul was telling us. We are living this, friend. This is such a great opportunity for us to share the gospel, to reach people for Christ. This is when the world is looking for an answer. They're looking for protection. They're running around everywhere with a mask that probably won't filter anything out, when somewhere in their house they probably have one of these. And is this actually filtering you? Is everything that you are getting filtered through this word, or is it being diluted through a watered down gospel? So my question is this, and you can send this into the church, you can send this into whcc.net. I'd like for you to answer this question for me. What do you see that waters down the gospel? What are you seeing in your life, or maybe your friend's life, or your family's life, that has watered down the gospel? I spent a couple of days praying about this. This is what I believe the Lord impressed upon my heart, that a watered down gospel teaches peace without mentioning problems. A watered down gospel teaches forgiveness and leaves out repentance. You just can't stop at the sinner's prayer. It takes repentance also. And the Lord is really getting our attention right now as the church and as the world. Remember, God loved the world so much. He loved the world so much that He sent His Son to die for the world. So my question is this: what do you see that is watering down the gospel? Send us your answers. I'd love to hear from you. God bless you. Thank you so much for taking time and listening to us. God bless you.